sitting the lectures, that was the first time I started asking my question, Rahul, what do you really want to do? Like, had a light bulb moment for me, like, wow, this is great. Like, I like building and creating things. That maybe, like, I want to build things rather than sort of like move numbers around. I was like, I'm going to become like a Warren Buffett or a George Soros kind of guy.
Today on the podcast, we have Rahul Goyal, who's got quite a different journey to many of our other podcast guests. So he initially started in private equity before jumping into starting his own company called Spyn, which was able to exit and settle. Then he was a bit lost for a little while, trying to work out what he was going to do next. He then became product at CityMappa before leaving again to create Cosmos. Now at Cosmos, he raised money, but later realised that the company didn't quite fit with what his ambitions were anymore. And we're interviewing him at a really interesting stage where he's trying to work out what's the next steps. So this is quite a rare journey of somebody who had a successful exit and is now trying to discover the next steps. We're the Bay HQ, and this podcast is powered by HPC Innovation Banking. So Rahul, you've had quite the journey so far in your career, but when you were a kid, what were your ambitions? What did you want to be? What was little Rahul trying to be?
Grew up in India. I grew up in sort of a family, like my dad was into had his own business growing up, and he was into stock markets. So growing up, I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. Like unlike people say, oh, what was your 5-year-old child wanted to be? Like I have no memory sort of like of wanting to be anything. But sort of, I think the drive to become an entrepreneur did happen during sort of my growing up years. My dad went through a lot of ups and downs while growing up. Sort of like we went through like living in very massive houses to living in a 1-bedroom flat, and sort of like seeing the ups and downs of my dad was interesting. And I think like it gave me the desire that I would like to have a business and I would like to make a lot of money in my life so that I don't have to go through the ups and downs. I think as a kid, that sort of like seeing the hardships sort of like that was happening in the family, sort of both seeing the extremes of like extremes of having money and extremes of not having money. I think that kind of shaped my inner child, sort of that I would like to have money where my family doesn't have to go through the ups and downs.
Do you think your parents encouraged you to go down that entrepreneurship path? Or if your dad had those problems, did you think, I don't want my son to go through the same thing?
Nope. I think it was the complete opposite. I think my dad especially wanted me to either go for a job, like go into sort of like banking or sort of take up a job, or become a government civil servant. So those are the two things that was always talked about growing up, that sort of like, this is what you're supposed to be. Like my dad really wanted me to be actually go into the government and become a civil servant. And that was something which I was getting trained for. Like my dad used to sort of like teach me like this and that. And sort of like entrepreneurship was never on the cards, like growing up in India. Yeah.
So what did you end up studying at university?
So I ended up studying engineering. So I think I didn't have much interest in it back in the day. So I think like in India, like either you choose to be an engineer or you choose to be a lawyer or you choose to be a doctor. And there are couple of paths you go into, and engineering seemed just right because for me, doctor was not something which I could do because I kind of didn't like blood. So reading biology was something I used to get really scared by back when I was small. So I said, okay, no biology, that's gone out of the window. Law was something I thought of it, but sort of I was not a great public speaker. So I couldn't imagine myself arguing with anybody in a court, I guess. So chose the path that it was a choice of no doctor, no lawyer. So, okay, engineer seems to be the right thing. And I just ended up going to engineering school for that.
And after engineering school, you didn't actually become an engineer, right? Or did you do that for a time? No.
So once I became into engineering and I got the complete freedom to think, I think engineering, like going to uni and getting out of our house from my parents, was the first time I actually explored what do I want to do. I think that was the first time, even though sort of like obviously like now in a retrospective look at my journey in the past, I didn't know I wanted to become an entrepreneur back when I was small. Somewhere in my psychology, it was more about sort of like, I want to be rich, right? And then my parents wanted me to be a civil servant or sort of like go into a job, come into engineering school, and I'm sitting and sort of sitting the lectures. I'm just like, what is this thing? What is this stuff happening? Like, why am I sitting here? And I think that was the first time I started asking my question, Rahul, what do you really want to do? It was hard. I think the first year I went to engineering school, even though I went to one of the top schools in India, The hard part was I had been chasing to get into the top schools in India for almost 2 years by that point. And the struggle was that I'm here at the top school and I don't feel like studying. That was my first year was challenging. I completely almost failed my exams. My 4 years in uni, I didn't study much. I sort of had to figure out what do I really want to do. And even though I was good in studies to get into the uni, but when I went to uni, I completely lost because I had no sort of parental pressure around me to study. So because there was nothing holding me accountable to perform in studies, I completely stopped going to lectures. And university had an interesting thing that you could choose as a student if you want to go to the classes or not, right? So I practically would have attended 5 to 7 lectures in my 4 years at uni. And the time I was in uni, but I figured out that I like investing. So this was a funny moment for me because my dad had been in the stock markets for years by that time. And growing up, I was like, I'm not going to go to the stock markets. But somehow I was getting attracted to it, maybe because that's what I had been hearing all the time. And I started reading these books from Warren Buffett, all the shareholder letters, all sort of. And that was the time I started getting excited about the world of business and the world of finance. I was like, I'm going to be by the time I finished my uni, I was like, I'm going to become like a Warren Buffett or a George Soros kind of guy. So that's what kind of pushed me to come to London from that point on, that, I want to study at the top schools and sort of see business and understand finance, and I'm going to go into finance. And that's how I shifted from engineering school to business school on that path.
When you started doing that, how were you finding it when you were actually in that world and doing that kind of role and job?
I think coming to business school was a bit of a shock, especially from a cultural perspective, that sort of you've grown up in India and sort of you came to business school. It was this international world, so many different cultures. First of all, that was for the first 1 or 2 years in London, that was the thing to adjust to because I was still an Indian trying to figure out my identity in this new world. So I think both in the professional world and the student world, that was something I had to kind of figure out. And then going into finance, I actually enjoyed it in the initial days. I was like, this is it. This is fun. But the thing was that what happened was I wanted to be in public markets. I wanted to be in hedge funds and sort of stock markets. That was what I wanted to do, but I couldn't get a job. So this is 2011, right? The markets have just come out of the Lehman crisis, and sort of hedge funds and public markets were not doing really that well when I just finished business school. So I ended up going into private equity. And I ended up going into the distressed assets. So stuff like non-performing loans and distressed stuff which where companies were not performing well. So going and buying them and sort of fixing them up to make it work. So that was the stuff I ended up getting into. So it was interesting because my passion lied in public markets, but I'd somehow ended up in private markets and in fixing companies which were not doing well. So learned a lot, but didn't really feel fitted into it perfectly well. And I left it after 2 years. And that was the first time, actually the second time I had to actually go into soul searching, because I came to engineering school, sort of figured out finance is my thing, ended up in finance, not the perfect fit, but sort of had to again re-understand myself, that what has happened, why am I not sort of fitting into this thing.
It's interesting. I think a lot of people have that a couple of years into their first job.
Yeah.
You've got the honeymoon period at the beginning, right? New job, it's all shiny, all new, everything like that. Then after a couple of years, that fades away, and then you realize, do I actually enjoy what I'm doing or not?
Exactly.
And taking that step out, did you know what you were going to do once you left, or did you leave and then start the soul searching?
So I think this is a funny thing that you made me realize, that back when I'd gone into finance, the shiny thing, actually I had never bought a lot of branded stuff in my life. So I used to make a lot of money as a private equity guy. So in the first 1 year was just all about buying designer stuff with designer clothes. And once sort of you start buying it, you're like, well, I don't you had been holding that desire for such a long time, and when you do it, you're like, okay, done. Okay, now what? When I left finance, I had no idea what I was going to do. I just left it. I had some savings because I was making a lot of money for my age back in the day in finance, but sort of I had savings, so I left it. I was like, I'm going to take some time off and figure out what I really want to do. And at that time, my idea was going into public markets, because I think that's what I had been craving for, that I'm going to go into a hedge fund, figure out a job in a hedge fund and sort of get there. And then I left, and then I tried applying to hedge funds and sort of getting into public markets, but it was very hard. I didn't have a visa to be here in this country. So anybody who had to give me a job had to sponsor me. So that was another level of hardship which I had to go through, which is okay, you have to first get a job, and then you also need to get that company to sponsor. And when the job market is in sort of like a dire place, it's very hard to get that. So couldn't figure that out. And I was like working hard to get the job. But then what happened was there's a funny point in my life where I've come from India, and growing up in India, like I never used to cook. Like my mom used to cook the food in the house, and I had never been in the kitchen. I started cook like because this is the first time I was not doing anything like after studies and sort of like my job. I started cooking. I was like, I need to take care of my health. I need to sort of like cook food. So I used to go to Tesco and sort of like buy ingredients and cook some recipe. And that was the first time in my life, I think I had the joy of making something, like making something from your hand, like not just like making software or making like writing code, making something from your hand where you go and pick up some like 10 different things, mix them together, and then there is a dish. Then I started calling like my friends to my house to show them sort of what I'd cooked. And that was a fun experience. That like had a light bulb moment for me, like, wow, this is great. Like I like building and creating things. Like that moment had not occurred in my head up till that point. And that side sort of like started to like play into my entrepreneurial itch that maybe like I want to build things rather than sort of like move numbers around. So yeah, that was a trigger point, and that sort of started me sort of figuring out like what tech was and what sort of like entrepreneurship. So this is 2013, and 2013 London tech was not big. Like it was in its very, very early stages. There were not many people to talk about it. So I was at my friend's wedding in India, and I met my friend from business school and undergrad over there. And we were just discussing, and he also had just like shut down his first company back in the day. And then he was like, hey, like, I'm like, there's another friend of ours, like he's doing a startup in India, which is doing like on-demand stuff. And like you press a button and stuff happens. There's grocery, there is food, there is cabs. I'm like, yeah, cab was like, Halo was happening in London at that point of time. I was like, wow, yes, like I've been using Halo, man. Like it's so great. Like I wish like you could press a button and things happen. And that's where we kind of decided that we I'm going to come into tech. And that train journey was like that serendipitous moment out of somewhere. It connected us both, and sort of we were discussing in the train like an overnight journey, and we decided that maybe we'll do a startup together, and maybe we'll do it in London. And at that time, we had no idea. Like we had no visas, we had no entrepreneurship visas. Like my co-founder at that time was sort of living in India. That was a point which was led to my first company.
So what was the first company called? What did it do?
So it was supposed to be an on-demand. So the idea was that the on-demand generation is here. Like mobile is going to become like a remote control, and stuff is going to happen. So like we had, like there were two problems as a banker I used to face, which were sort of like getting my laundry done. And the other problem I used to face was getting my house cleaned. Right? Like so at that point, I never used to clean my house. I never used to sort of like clean my clothes. I never used to cook my food. Over like 10 years in, I do all of those things myself. But at that time, like as a kid, as a young person, I didn't used to do this thing and needed help to be able to do those things. So the idea was that I'm going to do that. So we looked into the cleaning market. There were a few companies doing the cleaning stuff already. We're like, okay, so the cleaning is happening already. So laundry doesn't seem to be nobody's doing. So maybe we'll do laundry and dry cleaning. And that's how that became our first company. Back in the day.
And what was it called?
Spyn.
And so how long did that run for? And
so it ran for 3.5 years. First year completely bootstrapped. Me and my co-founder sitting in a car, sitting in a rented car, driving around London, picking up clothes. Very interesting times. So like you sit in a fancy finance job in a suit, and then you suddenly become a delivery driver, and it has to do a lot. It does a lot to your ego, and does a lot to, and you see the actual how people on the other side behave. Like, like when a delivery person sitting outside on a doorstep of somebody, how people actually behave, it kind of gives you a reflection of how, like, I also used to behave to people who are doing those kind of jobs. And I think it was a very humbling moment for me, like about life and sort of about, like, I want to shout at them, like, do you know who I am? Do you know who I am? But then I remained silent and used to just observe and see like the whole dynamics of like all these jobs, and sort of like sitting in a car. Me and my co-founder, we would just be sitting, like our car was the office where he was sitting on the driving seat sometimes. And I was like, we would just shift, and I would be on the computer, basically on my personal hotspot, trying to work with one engineering friend of ours to make the app. So I think that 1 year was like that, and then we somehow got 50K of funding, then we got 150K, then we got $500,000. Like a team went from just two of us for the first year to like having a team of around like 10-ish people. Interesting journey. Like we had around 12 vans running around London, 2 warehouses, a lot of laundry and dry cleaning getting picked up around London for a fun, great ride. I think it was very operational, very, very like things moving around, always like somebody's having a flight and they're gonna like they need the suit really at the right time. Somebody's having a evening party and they need the dress, and like if the driver is late by 15 minutes, everything is going to fall apart. And so I think like it was a very interesting sort of always on fire kind of like startup. So that's where I lost all my hair. Doing all the customer service and all the stress took over me. So yeah, that was the journey of that company.
So it's interesting as well because it said it's such a big change from working in private equity to then getting scrappy and pulling your sleeves up to get the work done.
Yeah.
Did that come easy to you to like switch that mindset? Because you said about the humbling side of things, about how before people would have looked at you in a certain way because of the suits you wore, because of the status you had. And when you know that was going to be a change in terms of like you have to work in a car and things like that, did any part of you be like, actually, no, I should just go back to private equity? Why am I going to go and do that kind of stuff? Or do you feel like it was very easy because of excitement?
I used to think that in the night. I think like while sleeping, I used to always think that I wish I had not left my job, because I think like you're making a lot of money sort of, and suddenly you are faced with this world of uncertainty. You're doing all the hard labor. Like it was crazy at that time. I remember like I used to wake up in the morning at 5 a.m. Me and my co-founder, we would wear a running stuff and go out in the neighborhoods, put flyers into the letterboxes. Then we would actually stand at the tube stations, in different tube stations in London, distribute the flyers. That was the early morning. Then we would take the clothes we collected last night to the dry cleaners, like to submit them for cleaning. Then we would have a breakfast, like basically like a falafel wrap or something from like a place in Park Royal, I remember. And we would do that, then come back home, sleep for half an hour, and then get back into our car, start doing the pickups and the deliveries. And that will go until around 12 or 1 in the night. So that was the life, right? For 1.5 years, that was what me and my co-founder were doing back in the day. And I think like you have doubts. And at this time also, like we also had immigration problems. We had visa problems. We didn't have we had to get our visas changed. So there were a lot of like stuff, like just like you don't have money, you are eating, like you're running on like I remember our budget for food used to be around £6 a day. So you have £6 a day budget, no money, immigration stuff, figuring out like sitting in a car. And you're like, why did I make this decision? Why did I make this decision? Why am I doing this? But then you're doing this and you're in that situation. You can't just keep like running away. Oh, I missed that, so I'll go and do that. Now you've committed to this, so you do this. I think some part of irrational optimism as a young person, like I was 24, 25 at that time, I was like, there was irrational optimism that this is going to be $1 billion company. And at the same time, there was like the part of me which was scared. There was a part of me which was uncertain. I think there were all these like different emotions which were sitting with me. And I had never done customer service. I had never done marketing. I had never built an app. I had never built. So learning all those new things. So everything was new. And then there was like unit economics and this and that. Like even though I had been to a business school, like when you go to a business school, you study from a notion of like how to make like presentations and strategy of like $1 billion companies. But when you're doing stuff on the ground, nobody teaches you what you're going to feel like when you're going to do the scrappy stuff. Like there is no MBA for that, right? Like there is nobody can teach you. You have to actually just do it to actually even understand what it takes to get £1 of revenue from a customer. Like making a salary, like making a like 100K salary, like is one thing, and making £1 from a customer is a completely different sort of like way of like making money. So I think like that took some time to be absorbed in the head, and there were hard lessons around that time.
Obviously, it didn't become $1 billion company, right?
Yeah.
Unless you kept that secret. So what happened in the end? Like what made you move on from Spyn?
I think we were doing north of £1 million in turnover with that company, and it was going great. I think like we had figured out systems, we had figured out our processes. We had read this book called Checklist Manifesto, which had helped us build a lot of procedures in the company, processes in the company, and we had become very good at that. But at some point when the processes were there, we started sort of getting some small profit from the company. We started realizing that sort of we can't, like at the time ambition was to become $1 billion company, as I mentioned. So we realized that we can't get there, because if we have to actually make the money, make the profits, we'll have to either scale very fast internationally, or we would have to build a lot of dry cleaning factories to actually make margins. Because there was a lot of this like scale scale plus a lot of operational depth required. And me and my co-founder were not really ready to sort of like get into dry cleaning business. Like we wanted to be in the tech layer. We didn't want to actually go into the dry cleaning aspect of it. We evaluated getting a bank loan and setting up the factories and setting up the facilities. But it just felt too like very different from sort of like what we thought that we could be we want to be tech entrepreneurs. You don't want to be at that time, like obviously my views have changed across time. At that time, it felt like such a big drag to want to set up a big like facility, etc. So we decided not to like get into the whole like proper facility kind of stuff. And we got lucky at that time that the dry cleaner who is the biggest dry cleaner in over here in the UK, and was also our supplier who was cleaning our clothes. So he wanted to buy the company. And he ended up buying the company, helped us put the company like in the right place. Like the app was used by them for like a few years after that. So it was good to see the product still being used and sort of like customers still getting the service that they wanted. And yeah, so it got acquired, and me and my co-founder moved on from that stuff. But there were interesting times. Like me and my co-founder had a fight when the company was getting acquired, and like. So, and this person, my co-founder, we had known for 3 years as a co-founders, 1 year in the same business school, 4 years in the same undergrad, right? And now we had a fight because after the company got acquired, we didn't speak for like 9 months, and we were living in the same flat. We were living in the same flat,
Yeah.
right? And we didn't speak to each other for 9 months. Imagine that. Like we would just like go. We knew like when this guy would be in the kitchen, when I would be in the kitchen, and we didn't speak. But yeah, like funny times. But at some point we realized that we couldn't. We had to sort of like figure that out, and we started talking to each other, and then we became best friends again. And finally, the second company also I founded with him. So yeah, that was the journey of that company.
We hope you're enjoying the episode so far. We just want to give a quick shout out to our headline partners, HPC Innovation Banking. One of the biggest challenges for so many startups is finding the right bank to support them. Because you might start off and try to use a traditional bank, but they don't understand what you're doing. You're just talking to an AI assistant, or you're talking to somebody who doesn't really understand what it is you're even trying to do. HPC have got the team that are built out over years to make sure they understand what you're doing, they've got the deep sector expertise, and they can help connect you with the right people to make your dreams come true. So if you want to learn more, check out hpcinnovationbanking.com. So I really like that as well, because so often you hear the glamorized version of things, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting to see, like you said, where you knew the logic of why you wanted to be acquired at that time. And also the reality of like, it is very difficult because when there's co-founders, you've got to agree on that sale and what's the right term and things like that. And if you've got different opinions, it can be a really stressful time. So it's good to hear that you then made up and like were able to build another company. But you had a bit in between before you had the next company, right? Or was it straight into?
No, we had I had an in between. So we took a break so we got the money from this sale, so that allowed me to take a bit of a break. So I didn't do proper work for 1.5 years after that, and we basically exploring ideas. So this was the time of cryptos, right? Like it was like cryptos were going big, and you're like, well, so every month, like I would come up with a new idea. Like, yes, I'm excited about this stuff, and I'm going to work on this. And then like the energy would die off. So obviously after you've done the first company, I think what happens is your brain becomes very skeptical of every new idea. You start being over analytical, over rationalizing every single thing. The first company was like, oh yeah, it seems like a great idea. Like I'm going to just do it. Second time you're like you have very high filters you put in, very high analytical filters before you even start anything, right? So for 1.5 years, I just basically kept thinking of ideas. I used to sit in Passion Capital's office back at that time. So 1.5 years, I was just like sitting over there, coming up with new ideas, grand world-changing ideas, I would say, right? Yeah. But never sort of like, nothing would go forward because I would just kill it in my brain as soon as the idea would come along. So then I decided that I'm going to take a break. What happened was that I went to the Valley for a few months, and I was like, I'm just going to see what happens in the Valley. How is it different from London? Everybody keeps saying, Valley is great, London is not that great. Like, okay, sure, like let me go to the Valley. And then spent some time over there. It was fun time. Just like I have a lot of friends from my engineering undergrad over there. So went to a lot of like these big tech companies' offices, saw what was happening, saw the ecosystem. And the funny thing was, I'm like one of the people I used to sit with on the desk in Passion Capital's office was Andy Chung, who was Tiny's like one of the VCs. He's a VC partner here in London. And he invited me to a party happening in AngelList. And at that party, I basically was like, just like, went over there in SF, and I was networking. There were a lot of people from the London ecosystem, from the American ecosystem over there in that party. And I somehow ended up sort of like bumping into Sitar at Connect. And she was over there. And I had met her for a pitch for my first company, Spyn, right? And I had fought with her back in the day, right? And I was very passionate about what I was doing. And she was like, well, I don't give my clothes through dry cleaning. I just do it in the washing machine. And I was very angry at her, right? So she remembered that like angry guy who had fought with her in SF. And we started talking. And she was like, what are you doing now? And I told her about different ideas I'm working on. I was like, I don't know where am I? Like, I've spent 1.5 years. I've not come up with an idea. I don't know where I'm going. So she, like, I think, I don't know like what happened back then, but somehow that incident landed me into CityMappa, which was one of Connect's portfolio companies. I was like, I want to learn product. Like, think my mindset at that time was like, okay, I can't come with an idea. I need to do something. Let me go and work with the best people who build products. And CityMappa was the biggest, sort of like one of the best products here in London. So she connected me to the founder of CityMappa. I ended up talking to him. And yeah, that's how I ended up at CityMappa.
And you feel like from going from being a founder to working in a like larger scale up at that time, how was that transition? Was that a comfortable one? Did you feel like you learned a lot from that experience?
Well, I learned a lot. It was like great, like because I like my first company, which I built in tech, was just like me learning from like random places, like blogs basically, and like by doing stuff. And over here, like there was a company actually operating, like people working. So you had like all these processes and systems and how product management is done, how this is done, and how that is done. And it was great to see how one of the greatest products have been built, right? So I think for me, that was an eye-opening experience. Like had one of the best times in my life, like those 2 years when I worked in product at CityMappa. The mindset, the ambition, the people, I think it was all energized like me to a crazy point. I remember like to Sitar after like 9 months or 10 months, I have this email which I was showing my friend the other day. I wrote her a long thank you email saying that this is the best thing that ever happened to me. Like, thank you so much. And so yeah, like it was like a great experience for me to go into and do product for 2 years over there. And it was not hard. I think like having done the startup was way, way harder than doing a product role. So for me, those 2 years, even though from most other people's lunches, I was doing a lot of work. I was sitting in the office from like till 9 p.m., 10 p.m. like almost most days. For most people, they're like, what is this guy doing? For me, it was like, this is chill, man. This is chill. This job is so chill compared what I had
compared to delivering clothes
and like dealing with all the pressure and all the customer service and all the crazy stuff that was happening, like clothes getting lost and this crazy stuff. And I'm like, okay, yeah, like you do product management, you like design, you have engineering, you have a very clean system, a clean slate, and a very relaxed thing. And for me, that was a very therapeutic job. But had a lot of fun. Like I think it was a great time for me. I call it the kind of like a vacation. Like, even though I was doing a job, it was like when people talk to me like, how is it a vacation? I'm like, it's mentally it was a vacation, because mentally the amount of cognitive load I was taking while running a company, with dealing with all the like things on fire all the time, to here where it's like you have a whole team, you have a whole system. It was a much different kind of like mental turmoil going on in the brain.
Yeah, maybe I need to take a holiday and go to CityMappa's work on product.
No, I think it was not a holiday from that perspective. I think like from the physical perspective, it's like a lot of work, but at the same time, mentally, I think it's the mental cognitive load of the different number of things on fire all the time.
Yeah,
so as an entrepreneur, you have like right? Exactly. As an entrepreneur, you have like 100 things on fire all the time, right? Like you have to do payroll, you have to figure out money, you have to figure out customers, you have to figure out product, you have to figure out this, that, everything, right? When in a job, like it's completely different. You might be doing that same amount of work, but it's always a linear kind of work. Like you do X and then you do Y and then you do Z. So it was a very different mode of operating, and I really enjoyed that sort of mode of operating for the time I was there.
And then after that, you founded another company, right?
Yes.
So tell us about that.
After having been for 2 years, I think my learning curve kind of stopped. I think, and also there was that happening in the background, that my learning curve, like I was enjoying the job, but I'd kind of become like, I'm leading product at this great company and sort of it's great. 2 years, I realizing it has become an ego drive more than sort of a thing where I'm actually like it's become a cruise control kind of thing where stuff is just happening and I'm just sitting there and just like doing my motions. So that was happening, and then COVID hit, right? And COVID hit, and I was like, and CityMappa is sort of being a public transport app, nobody was using it anymore, right? Across the world, the user numbers completely sort of went from, it dropped 80% or something, right? Like 70, 80% across the world. It was crazy. And we didn't know what was going to happen, right? So we started working on cycling products and sort of like that started taking off and sort of, but stuff was happening, and we built a lot of like different things for like something called CityMappa Mobility Index, which was showing how much transport is being used in a city, et cetera, et cetera. But that was sort of like, so there was a backdrop of me being in cruise control, and then suddenly lockdown has happened, right? So for 6 months I was in the CityMappa, I was like working over there. I was realizing that this COVID and the lockdown, like at that, like obviously now we know it has gone away, but at that time it seemed like a reality that might be the permanent reality or some kind of like reality. Like people are going to making like crazy like HVAC suits. Like there was a lot of like Twitter stuff around sort of HVAC suits being the new reality, people sitting at homes all the time and everything being delivered, drones, like, you know, like if you go into Twitter feeds from that time, it's like crazy dystopian reality in everyone's heads. So it's like, maybe this might be true. And one of the things which I was noticing that work had changed permanently, and I really thought that I really used to miss office. Like even though there's a whole camp which loves remote work, and there's a whole camp which loves offices, and there's a camp in the between. But I was in the camp who used to love offices, right? I used to love the community. I used to love the vibe. I used to love like hanging around people and talking to people all day long. And in remote work, when we sort of implemented remote work stuff in CityMappa, what had happened was that like the work productivity was fine. Like everybody was working, everybody was enjoying the work, but the community feeling was dying. People were trying to do Friday socials, but sort of like it was not really working out. So I was like, hey, and it felt like remote work was there to stay. So it's like, if remote work is going to stay, we need a solution to this community feeling, community vibe, which was there in the office. So I started exploring solutions of how can we have community in remote work. And that's where Cosmos came into picture. I was like, this seems like an opportunity. Let's go here. And it was more of an experiment, a thought experiment, like how I would say. And I got back with my co-founder, who had fought at some point and become friends again, and then we became best friends again. So I called him up, and he was working at TransferWise at that time, doing product again. And we were like, bro, it's time. It's been 2 years. We have been in a job. We've been in a job. Let's start a company again, and it seems like the right time. So we just jumped in, and we started we got into EF, and if we basically like work together, got the 150K from them, and then we had investment from Local Globe.
It's interesting there because one of the things I'd think about, because you'd already exited a company beforehand.
Yeah.
Whereas EF I tend to think is more for people who are earlier stage. And so did you come into that? What was the reason behind you going into an accelerator at the beginning there?
What was the reason behind going into an accelerator? You just want a home. Yeah. I think like it's more than, I think because I'd spent 1.5 years sitting on a desk in in Passion's office, I think I had realized for myself that it just doesn't work. You need to be surrounded by entrepreneurs and people who are doing stuff. And see, this is an especially interesting time. This is COVID. We're sitting in lockdown, sitting at a home. And I knew like it's not going to be easy. And obviously like we got the funding fairly quickly from Local Globe back in the day. But we didn't know at the time when we were starting the company that it's going to happen, right? It could happen like 1 year or 2 years before we got any kind of funding for doing the thing, right? So our point of view was that let's just go and let's just have a community of people and sort of people who are around us, like who are building companies, building things, talking about startups, because you kind of need your own bubble. You kind of need to zone out and like have a bubble where people are talking about the same stuff which you are into so that you can focus and move things forward. So that was the reason we chose to go to EF.
And you said you raised quite a bit of money there, right? From some quite major venture capital funds.
Yeah.
Like how much did you raise? Because I know we're going to go into something else after about this.
So we raised around 2.6 million. So we raised 2.6 million pounds. And from Local Globe, EF came into picture. And also we had Tiny, who was the partner and like who had called me to the AngelList party back in the day. So, and a lot of like the old, like all the angels, and there were a lot of like angels and people I'd known from across time who came into the company. Some previous investors from our first company. So like CityMappa founder, people from TransferWise. So all of them came in and gave us the capital.
So that's a huge boost to confidence you get from all these people who are like experts in their fields, like presidents, like all these kind of people are huge, right? And as you're building this company, and I think So one of the people I worked with quite a lot is from Hopin, right?
Yeah.
And I guess I might have had a similar experience to you of where the idea was that remote work is going to be the future.
Yeah.
Everybody's always going to be working from home, things like that. Whereas as things started opening up again, as we see now, people, even like some of the larger companies are saying, like even Zoom is saying that everybody needs to come back to the office now, right?
Yeah.
So that reality shifted. But at the time you built it, that would seem like that's the new reality. The new normal is like...
Yeah.
And as that started changing, I guess, right, then your mental models of what the future for the company would have been would have changed too.
Oh, yes.
And how is it adjusting to that?
It's hard. I think you get attached to your opinions. I think, for example, like I had built an opinion back when I started a company and had a vision and a mission, sort of like you make these decks and sort of like you're hiring all these people in a company and you're selling. Like half the job of an entrepreneur is to sell and like convince people of an idea, right? And then when the world shifts, you're still talking the same, like a parrot, like you're talking the same stuff. And suddenly you're like, the world is changing. And many people are telling me, Rahul, the world is no longer the same world. But like my team, like people outside, the customers were leaving. And I was like, no, this is not happening. I was completely in denial for a long time. For like months, I was in denial that there was no reality shift that is happening. And because I had been saying this stuff to everybody, that I was the megaphone, right? So it was very hard when the reality actually hit me. Like from denial phase to basically when the reality actually hit me, it was very hard for me to accept that.
What did you do once reality hit you?
It was hard. Mentally hard because it's it's a breakdown of a lot of things. Like it's a challenge for the company. It's a challenge on the vision. It's a challenge on sort of like what you feel, why you do the work, because you kind of need to find a new thing. You need to find a new vision, then something new to excite you, something new to like something new. You need a new mental model of like, what does remote work look like now? And I had no answers. People are looking up to me for an answer and I don't have an answer. Like I'm with the team has no answer. So you're all in like this kind of deadlock situation. And it was hard to sort of deal with it mentally. And this was a time when sort of it happened very suddenly. The world, COVID finished, right? The war started happening. I think the Russia-Ukraine stuff started happening. The offices started coming back. Like people started going back to the office. The tech world stocks all fell down. It was 3 or 4 months, right? Like all the stuff fell down suddenly, right? And you're like, the venture capital market completely evaporated. There are all these like firings happening everywhere. World is falling. It's like those 3 months, I remember the world was just falling apart everywhere, right? Like you're like, war is happening. This is and they're sitting in the middle. You're like, and you are like focused on. There is this macro stuff happening. There's a micro stuff happening of like your head, your mind. Where am I? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to say to investor? What am I supposed to say to the team? What are we doing? And I think there were all these questions which were there, but I guess it was a struggle. Like if I'm honest, like because it also puts it's like a balloon got inflated and suddenly a pin has been pricked into it, both from an external reality, like on the company side, and both also on the internal ego, where I think now when I look back, I had become a bit arrogant. Like let's say, like when I like raised all that capital, had all the team, and some part of it is like in a way, job hazard. Like where you're like always excited, always sort of pumped up about like what you're trying to do and selling the vision and trying to be like Steve Jobs, quote unquote, howsoever you want. But like you kind of develop this personality, crazy personality. And somewhere it's needed and somewhere it's like it also backfires you when things don't work out. So that's what happened. We had a lot of customers leave us, but then a lot of customers came back also. So my co-founder is still running the company and I'm very proud of him in a way that he has persevered. Somewhere I feel like I quit on the company and he has persevered and he's still pushing through sort of like to make it work. And new kind of customers are coming up and new sort of like types of companies which are sort of like adopting remote work in a different way are showing up. So the cohort has changed from tech companies using the product to now like, for example, customer service companies using it and sort of companies which are doing virtual assistants, companies which are doing virtual effects. So I think it's a whole different cohort of companies which are starting to use the product now. But let's see. I think like he's persevered. I think he's on a different journey. I'm on a different journey. But can't be said what is right or what is wrong. You just do what is right or wrong in the moment. We can only connect the dots.
So we're gonna have to wrap up pretty soon. But for me, it's really exciting to have this episode because one, you've been able to scale and get a business acquired.
Yeah.
Then you've gone back into a job again.
Yeah.
And now you've founded another company which hasn't quite worked out the way you thought it's going to be, and that's going to be doing something different. You've left that while your co-founder's continuing with it. And I think that's all different examples of people that are listening.
Yeah.
That often they don't get to hear. So for me, that's really great. And also your self-awareness to say that your ego got ahead of you and your arrogance got ahead of you, and to be able to look back on that, right? Because there are a lot of people in that phase that you were in maybe a couple of years ago who need to hear that, right? Who need to understand that they need to keep their ego in check. And one of the things I struggle with sometimes is that there's so many people in the entrepreneurship world or the founder world who constantly talk about overcoming imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
But there's some people who need a bit more of imposter syndrome where they've got too far ahead of themselves and they almost get that it's the world revolves around them and their idea, and being able to kind of humble yourself a bit and understand actually I need to treat people with respect. And it's one of the lessons you learned as well from your first startup at Spyn. I think there's so many great learnings there. So really interesting to see what happens in the future. I know you're in a point at the moment where you're trying to think about the future, what that holds for you. And it's a really exciting story there. So we're going to have to go into quick fire questions now for timing. So the first one is, who are 3 British Asians that you think are doing incredible work that you love to shout out and the audience should be paying attention to?
The 3 people which come to my mind is, one is Perplexity AI founder of Arvind. And then one is Reese. Reese has been, I think he was on your podcast at some point. I think really like his tweets and his sort of way of thinking. And the third person, I think, is Shan Puri. I think really love his podcast and sort of over time, his entrepreneurial journey, he's gone through a lot of ups and downs and sort of really enjoy watching his podcast, understanding his story and what he's been through. Yeah.
Awesome. So if people want to learn more about you and what you're up to in the future, where should they go to?
I think I'm just on LinkedIn right now. I've not really sort of built up a lot of online presence over the last years, but that's something which I'm actually considering. So I think the next few months I'm going to start working on YouTube and sort of Twitter. But as of now, I'm just on LinkedIn.
And if people could help you in the audience, what could they help you with?
I think I would love to hear any problems. I think as an entrepreneur, I'm always looking for problems to solve. Right now, I can't figure out a problem of my own. So I definitely need help on other people's problems in their lives. So if I can know a problem, that's the thing I would love to hear.
And then have you got any final words to the audience? Thanks.
I think I really enjoyed coming here. I think I always find sharing the story to be very interesting because you kind of subconsciously, there are different parts of the story, of my own story, which come up in the mind. So when you're sort of talking about stuff and wow, I didn't even think about that stuff for so many years. What was that stuff and how things relate? I think how you related my experience of being a delivery driver, of being humble, and the same guy becoming an arrogant guy 6 years later. It's wow, what was happening there? This guy had the lesson, but this guy, the future guy, forgot the lesson. What was that? So I think those connections somewhere, when you miss, and I really enjoyed sort of talking about that stuff and realizing that stuff for myself.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.